being bold is just going after the things you want despite your fears of failing or of other people judging you. And that can have to do with relationships, that can have to do with your career, that can be just asserting your opinion or your desires. It's ultimately just being the most authentic version of yourself.
Welcome to the Go Hunt Life Show, hosted by Todd Nevins.
This is Todd Nevins, and I interview people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but pulled the ripcord and blew up their comfort bubbles to hunt down their life that they had always dreamed of living. On today's episode, I speak to Kimberly Rich of the Bold Life movement. She's a certified high-performance coach for executives and entrepreneurs and the host of the Bold Life Movement podcast. But she was once chained to a desk at a corporate job doing all of the right things that she should have been doing, but felt trapped when one day she finally decided to challenge the shoulds and hunt down the life that she was called to live. We go through the steps that she took, and we talk about the mentors and communities that she looked to for direction that helped her redesign her life around freedom and location flexibility, and how her bold path just recently led her to walking up on stage and delivering her first TEDx Talk. My conversation with Kimberly starts right after a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, started his business the way most companies begin, with grit, determination, and a vision. And now, over the past decade, he has built his company into the go-to online printing powerhouse. If I've handed you a business card in the last 4 years, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. And the decals all over my laptop, yep, they did those too. They print and ship over 30 categories of printing products, from business cards and decals to banners, company letterhead, restaurant menus, and a ton of direct mail pieces. And they have just rolled out an entirely new website, ensuring that your online user experience to place an order is simple and fast. And when you place that order, use promo code GOHUNTLIFE for $10 off. And Jeff has just launched Success Hackers, which is a global group of tenacious entrepreneurs that share the latest tips, tools, and hacks into growing a business. Check it out at facebook.com/Success Hackers. And again, promo code GOHUNTLIFE for $10 off of your next print job at printdirtcheap.com. Kimberly, thank you for jumping on the show today.
Todd, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Where are you at right now? And if you were to walk outside, describe what you would see.
I am at my home in Austin. I work from home most days. If not here, I'm at a cafe. And fortunately, it's a gorgeous autumn day here, which tends to be rare. So I think if I was to walk outside right now, I'd see some sun and a beautiful courtyard in my apartment complex, which I feel very fortunate to have.
I am in Austin as well, and it is an incredible day today. How old are you? Are you married, and do you have kids?
I am not married. I'm 31 and no kids yet.
And your profession and primary ways that you earn a living?
I'm a certified high-performance coach, so that is my bread and butter. That's my main baby. But I also have, the entrepreneur in me diversifies, and I have a couple different ways that I make money, one of which is an Amazon business, and then I do some contracting as well to help out some other friends with their businesses.
But you weren't always an entrepreneur and a certified coach. You take me back to your life in 2013 when you were a web producer at Sabre Hospitality Solutions. What is that?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I knew what that was either until I actually started the job, but I somehow convinced them that I was qualified. So essentially, my last corporate job was managing luxury hotel websites and basically being a project manager, the go-between from the developer all the way to the customer. And it was actually really, really challenging and really fun, but obviously not my most fulfilling career. So I eventually left.
Where were you living?
I was living in Virginia at the time. Yeah. I was working out of Maryland and living in Virginia, which is where I grew up.
How many years did you have a corporate job?
I don't even know. Probably 5, 6, something around there.
I mean, weren't you doing what you were supposed to be doing? Like what you thought you went to college, you graduated, you got a job, you have a salary, you have all those things. Like, didn't you feel like you were doing what you were supposed to be doing?
I did. I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought about challenging the shoulds yet. And yeah, I mean, I did all the right things, graduated college, racked up, the appropriate amount of debt that one does when they go to a four-year university, and then took the first job that was given to me, which wasn't the job at Sabre. I had one prior to that, which I won't name, but yeah, it wasn't what I knew I was called to do by any means.
What was gnawing at you? Like what did you feel like, or how soon into this career, this move, were you thinking, this isn't what I'm meant to do or be, but what was happening?
Right. So I think for me, it wasn't that I necessarily had a bigger purpose that was gnawing on me at the time. It was more just that I knew I felt trapped. And I realized that, with my dad being a pilot, there were other ways to live your life. I knew one didn't have to be chained to a desk. So I started researching those alternative ways of living, ways that actually let me travel more and get outside more at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, And for me, I think at the time, the next best thing was just, how do I go remote? How do I not be chained to a desk? And so I started taking steps towards that goal.
Yeah. What were those steps? Like, what was the first step? And then how did you get to, or where we're going to next is you got to a location independent type of a lifestyle and a career. How'd you get there?
Sure. So I think it was end of 2012. I got a little brave and I proposed a remote work agreement to my employer. And at the time, we had a lot of remote employees, but they were domestic. They were scattered around the US, whereas I was proposing to move to Italy. I had studied abroad in Italy and just kind of planted this seed in my head that I couldn't ignore. And so every day at lunch, I would go and study Italian out in the little courtyard by our office. And one day I just submitted this request. And to my surprise, my management actually approved it. And it wasn't until it got all the way to the corporate office that it was turned down. So that was kind of the initial step, just dipping my toe into what was possible as far as working remotely. Once that eventually was squashed, I was like, okay, I have to get scrappy. I have to figure something else out. So I started researching things like digital nomad, and eventually I found Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And after I found The 4-Hour Workweek, it was just everything changed. All of the pieces of the puzzle started coming together, and it was all very fated, to be totally honest. It was like every person I tried to connect with to take me closer and closer towards that goal of quitting my job and moving overseas, it just happened so easily and fluidly.
Who were the people during that process that impacted you the most and that helped the most?
Well, about that time, I started reading different blogs and listening to different podcasts, and that was all very new to me. Content on the internet that helped you learn new skills and learn about different lifestyles. I just hadn't been exposed to it until that point. And so once I started realizing that there were already individuals out there who were doing what it was I wanted to be doing, I just found them on Twitter and reached out, really. It was a podcast called The Tropical MBA with Dan Andrews and Ian Schoen, which originally, lit this fire inside me. And I was like, I have to be in their community. I need to be part of their paid membership site. I have to get to their event in Berlin in a few months, and I need to figure out how to make this possible. So to make a long story short, I just sort of stalked my way into that community. And eventually, when they were hiring for a new community manager, I had made myself so visible and engaged with so many of the members already on Twitter, and then eventually inside the membership forum, that I made their hiring process very easy, and they picked me. And that was kind of my ticket out.
You hustled your way in. That is awesome.
I really did.
You quit your job April of 2013. Did you have this in place? Like you were the community manager for Tropical MBA at that moment? Is that how it worked?
Yeah, that's correct. So it was January 1st, 2013 that I read Tim Ferriss's book. And I think
What?
so it happened very quickly. So it was by February, I had found their community, which is actually called the Dynamite Circle.
Yeah.
And I got to give it up to them. This is their annual conference that I used to put on in Bangkok is happening this weekend. And so I have a lot of friends over in Bangkok right now, sending love their way.
Awesome.
But so I found the community in February, somehow networked my way into it by March. And then come April, I had applied for and gotten the job. And literally, I put my 2 weeks in that day and I flew out to Berlin 2 weeks later.
Walk me through the day you quit your real job.
Oh my gosh. I think that my managers were equally happy for me as they were not surprised. Because at this point I had requested to go remote to move to Rome. Try saying that 3 times fast. and unfortunately they'd had to say yes and then no. And then I actually followed up a second time and requested to go remote to live somewhere in the US. Mm-hmm. And they said no. I guess they had changed some policies and weren't really letting people do that anymore. And if I'm being honest, my plan had been go remote, move somewhere in the States because that's what is apparently allowed, and then legitimately just be wherever I wanted to be. As long as I was getting my work done, I figured it was going to be fine. But, when I actually went to quit, I think they were like, I don't fully understand what it is you're doing, but you sound really excited about it. So we're excited for you.
Good for them. That's good. Okay, so you walk out the door and you get on a flight the next day?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, my last day at the office was so bittersweet. I had a lot of best friends at that company, some of whom I'm still very close with. One of them actually flew out to my TEDx talk a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful that I had that office job, to be honest. But I had this very sweet send-off. And then literally the next morning, I flew off to Berlin, and a couple days after that, went to Vietnam and posted up.
So you posted up in Vietnam. Why Vietnam? You had to go to Berlin first because of your position, but then you chose Vietnam?
Yeah, so I actually was required to a degree to go to Vietnam as well because Dan and Ian, the membership site owners and the podcast hosts, they were living in Vietnam at that time. And a lot of the members of the community were also living in Ho Chi Minh City. So it was a really great place for me to go and have a built-in community and live somewhere I've never lived before. And it was very turnkey. It was awesome.
What do you remember most about the first 6 months?
Wow. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is how many times I remember thinking, I actually did it. Like, I made this happen. Whether I'm sitting in my apartment in Saigon, living alone for the first time in my whole life, let alone in another country, thinking, wow, I really did it. Or I was standing on a beach in Thailand, the exact beach that I had posted a photo up in my cubicle of, 4 months earlier. And I was just like, I can't believe this is my life. Like, life is literally whatever you freaking want it to be. And I just was sort of blown away by my own audacity for the first 6 months, I think.
Vision board. All right. So for the first 6 months, I've had a similar experience where we ripcorded out of our normal lives in Dallas, Texas, and moved to Mexico and lived in Mexico for 5 years. There is a honeymoon. I can't believe that we just did that. I can't believe I'm standing here. But then it kind of like life starts eventually. And real life kind of sinks in. Like, how soon did that happen? Like, what happened to get you there?
Well, I think the biggest misconception that people might have is that just because you're living overseas or you have all this freedom to travel, that it's always exciting and it's always fulfilling. And to a degree, it is more exciting and more novel than sitting in one spot in the States. But you are wherever you go, which means the same problems you have follow you. And I mean, I remember having just as many lonely nights in Saigon or Thailand or Taiwan, wherever it was I was living, as I'd had in the States, where you just kind of crave company and people might not be available, or you want a certain friend and they're not around. And I think it's just kind of like, you still have to work, you still have to manage your relationships, you still have to manage your mindset, and it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. All of those things are still true.
Were you worried about money? I mean, you were making enough money to pay the bills, or you had mentioned earlier that you had acquired some debt from college, all that kind of stuff. What was the financial piece of it? Did it fit?
To a degree, yes, but also no, if I'm being honest. What ended up happening right before I moved abroad was I had a little bit of credit card debt that I had accumulated, and I ended up getting a tax refund like the week before I left that paid off that exact amount.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it was really crazy. So when I left, I was going overseas with only student loan debt, which in my mind was just not that big of a deal. You pay the monthly payments. It's not a big deal. Less of a burden to me than credit card debt. But I also took a massive pay cut for this position because they were paying what could help someone survive in countries like Vietnam, where cost of living is much cheaper than in Washington, D.C. And so I was sort of traveling around with these entrepreneurs who made a lot more than I was, living a very similar lifestyle, but making much less. And in hindsight, I could have managed my money a little bit better, but I also wouldn't change a thing because it's all led me to where I am now.
Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Click Placement, a digital agency designing Google AdWords and pay-per-click marketing strategies for startups, small businesses, and even people building a side hustle. Hit up clickplacement.com to start a conversation. If you would like to personally support the Go Hunt Life podcast, go to patreon.com/Go Hunt Life to make a donation.
So how did you get to that point to founding the Bold Life movement? And you reserved the URL on July 14th, 2015, theboldlifemovement.com. What got you from Vietnam to reserving that URL, and what was your vision?
Wow. So there were definitely a lot of steps in between. I think that when I first left the States, I was chasing location independence. I was chasing a lifestyle, and I was starting really just to learn about entrepreneurship. It was a very new thing to me, but a lot of entrepreneurs are very growth minded, and that led me down the path of personal development. And so once I really started pursuing personal development, the doors opened and the idea came to me for the Bold Life movement. And it really happened at a conference that I was attending out on the West Coast. And once I got that idea, it just sort of snowballed from there. It was one of those things where you feel so aligned with the purpose of the business, which originally was just a blog, that people want to support you, and you meet other individuals who can help grow that vision. And that's sort of how it's evolved since 2015.
So in how many countries and how many cities have you lived in since 2013?
I don't know how many countries I've visited because I definitely took a lot of little trips, but I think the main places that I posted up during my time abroad were Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, and Berlin. Those were the big stints.
And how were you rolling in? I'm trying to get to like how someone could be listening to this and they are passionate about. You really only need to be passionate about one or two things, and you can combine that into a completely new career most of the time. So how are you combining your passion for location independence, your experience doing it, your experience in these countries, and then at this conference on the West Coast, like how did that all meld together for you to build something where you could actually monetize?
By the time I came up with the idea for the Bold Life movement, I was no longer managing the Dynamite Circle. But through that time, that 2 years that I was actively a part of that community, I was actively pursuing things that were important to me, but didn't necessarily match the mainstream status quo. I started to recognize what my skills were, and those had to do with people, I was a very good connector. I was very good at understanding people's strengths and pairing them with either projects or other individuals to highlight those. And I was good at inspiring people to take action they might otherwise be too scared to do. All the photos that I posted over those 2 years, I had great feedback from my friends back home on how it inspired them to take trips, how it inspired them to think differently about their career. So when it came time for me to launch the Bold Life movement, I was really just tapping into those things. I was like, I want to help people. I want to continue to work with like-minded individuals. And I want to keep pushing people to challenge all the things that they've been taught growing up about what their life should be. Because I've learned it doesn't have to be that way. It can be what you want it to be.
So what is your definition of bold or living a bold life?
So I feel like depending upon what I'm focusing on in my business, my definition kind of evolves. I actually have a big manifesto that I've created. It's on my website and I can hook you up with it afterwards, Todd. Okay. But it envelops all of the aspects to me that being bold encompasses. And so essentially, to distill it down, being bold is just going after the things you want despite your fears of failing or of other people judging you. And that can have to do with relationships, that can have to do with your career, that can be just asserting your opinion or your desires. It's ultimately just being the most authentic version of yourself.
Why do you say that is an incredible definition? How has that evolved since you started it?
I think that it's pretty much remained the same, but depending upon each client, it can look different. For someone, being more authentic might mean standing up for themselves more, whereas for someone else, being more authentic might mean redefining their career or their business or their living environment. It kind of shows up differently depending upon where you are in your life.
How do you become a certified high-performance life coach to then get yourself into a situation where you're able to help people?
When I first launched the Bold Life movement, I was basically just doing the coaching based off of my own experience. And then I started signing up for different programs, and I had individuals reaching out for personal branding coaching. They essentially wanted to build what I had built. And while that's somewhat under the umbrella of helping people lead a bolder life, it's helping people be bold enough to spread their message, it wasn't as holistic as I wanted it to be. So I found Brendon Burchard. This was last year, this was 8 months ago. I went to my first Brendon Burchard event, and having been to other personal development events, his pitch for his coaching program just resonated with me the most. And the actual curriculum for high performance coaching felt so on point with the type of work I want to be doing with individuals that I signed up there and then and dropped, thousands of dollars to be certified. And I've loved it ever since.
What makes it so unique?
One of the big things that differentiates Brendon's program is that he has been tweaking it for about 20 years, and he's had researchers deep diving into the efficacy of all of the questions I ask my clients during the 12-week program. So they've done thousands and thousands of test runs of this program and taken feedback. And you can actually get even more information about high performance coaching and high performance habits in his most recent book, High Performance Habits. So if this piques your interest at all, I definitely recommend checking out that book. It'll deep dive even further into what I'm able to say right now. But I think the data and the science behind the curriculum is what pulled me the most.
Is there a consistent problem or circumstance that your clients are looking to overcome? Is there a common theme?
Yeah, I think that the overarching theme is lack of clarity. High performers really excel in 5 areas. Now in his book, he references 6, but those are clarity, courage, energy, productivity, influence, and now necessity. And so clarity for me, it's just one of the biggest ones that we keep going back to time and time again with the clients, because if you don't have clarity about where you want to be going, it's really hard to generate the energy to get you there. It's hard to cultivate the focus to be productive. It's hard to feel confident enough and courageous enough to actually take the necessary actions. You don't have the necessity or the need to make that dream happen unless you're clear on what that dream or project is. So I really feel like clarity is the one that we revisit the most.
So you started the Bold Life Movement podcast last year, and you're how many episodes into it?
63.
63. Congrats.
Thank you.
Awesome. You started that last year, and then now you're a high performance coach. Like, how does it blend together what you're learning from your guests, what you're trying to teach your audience, and then your clients? How does it roll in together?
Sure. So when I first launched the Bold Life Movement podcast, my intention was to serve as that connector that I've always been. I know so many really inspiring, really sharp individuals who have accomplished some great things, and I wanted to bring their work to a greater audience. I wanted to, highlight them. And so now as a high performance coach, I'm able to draw on what has made these individuals so successful and illustrate that to the listeners and to my clients so that they can start, embracing some of the habits that make these interviewees high performers.
Is there one interview, one person, or one moment since you started the podcast that you think about the most?
I've had some really, really fun interviews. I can't think of anything really specific. One moment that's just coming to mind right now, I had Mark Manson on earlier this year when he launched his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Sorry, I don't know if you guys on the show.
Yep, of course.
And which has now been a New York Times bestseller for many, many weeks. And he's done so well. I'm really happy for him. But I think that his candidness on that interview was just so, well received. Like, I was so appreciative of how open he was about his writing process. And I actually met Mark at that Berlin event back in 2013 for the first time. So to see his growth over the past 4 years, I think that was what was so moving for me. Just watching where he was when I met him to where he's become now, it's really inspiring to me, because I really think that people underestimate what's possible in just a couple years.
I have not listened to that episode, but I will, definitely. Okay, so you have also just recently given a TEDx talk last month in September titled Intellectual Adventure. Walk me through the process of I want to give a TEDx talk to you walking up on that stage. How'd you do it?
So the theme of the event was actually intellectual adventure.
Okay.
The title of my talk was The Antidote to Regret.
That's way better.
A little more in alignment, but, last year at World Domination Summit, one of the speakers and a friend of mine, Kendra Wright, challenged the audience to commit to moving forward on a goal that they had been too scared to take steps towards. And my goal was to give a TEDx talk. And I think I realized that this was something I was passionate about because I understood how much it could be leveraged to spread a message. And I really wanted to get the message of leading a bold life out to as many people as possible. So this seemed like a great platform.
It is an incredible platform. How did you prepare and how did you feel stepping on the stage?
I actually just recently published a blog post, how to prepare for a TEDx talk. So if you have show notes, I invite you to
put it in there.
Yeah, it's very thorough. I basically walk through everything that happened from the time I decided to the introduction that was made between me and the organizer, and all of the steps I took to prepare. I watched a lot of TED Talks. I spoke with a lot of friends who had given TEDx speeches of their own. I read How to Talk Like TED, as well as Vanessa Van Edwards' book, Captivate, which is all about the science of succeeding with people. And, by the time I stepped on that stage, I had really wrung myself out emotionally. I'd been very, almost in hiding with myself. And I took a long time to put pen to paper and actually get the talk written, a lot longer than I would have thought. So by the time I got to the stage, I had processed all of that and I had perfected my talk and I had practiced it and rehearsed it to the point that I was in love with it. And I genuinely wasn't nervous when I got on that stage, which is the most bizarre thing because I can tell you I would typically get dry mouth and I've probably been more nervous giving my art journaling workshops to 5 women than standing on that stage.
You were really prepared.
I was just called, to be totally honest. It was one of the funnest days of my whole life and I can't wait for it to be posted.
When do you expect it to post?
We have received the rough draft of the video. So I'm hoping that once they make a couple little technical tweaks, they should be live in the next couple weeks. That's my goal.
Is there something now that, you've just done it a month ago, have you spoken to any of your either guests that have given TED Talks or other people that maybe did it that day? Has there been a common theme that's come out of those conversations?
I think that for people who are at the early stages of growing their platform, it can be a really big contributor to, increasing your audience size. I know that Emily Wapnick, when I had her on, she was in the process of finishing her book and she really hustled and got a lot of her blogger friends to promote and share her TEDx talk. So when it came time for the book launch, it did really well. And I think that a lot of that is attributed to the success of her TEDx talk, which for anyone listening is basically, what if you don't have one true calling? It's targeted towards people who identify as multi-potentialites. Great talk, great book. Love Emily.
Your talk was in Idaho, right?
Yes, it was in Coeur d'Alene.
Why was it in Idaho? You live in Austin.
Right. So I have a friend that I met through the Tony Robbins community, and he lives in Coeur d'Alene. He had helped organize that event last year. And, I had mentioned in passing that I really wanted to take the Bold Life movement to the TEDx stage at some point. And so he made the introduction for me. And when I was accepted, I flew up there, no questions asked, to give the talk.
Nice. All right. So what are you focused on, let's say in the next 6 months, hopefully in the next few weeks or whatever your TEDx talk is going to be published, but what are you focused on and what do you want to accomplish?
The big goal for me right now is finishing the book and getting that out. That's probably my number one priority. Also, my one-on-one clients that I work with, those are my my people. So between my clients and the podcast and the book, I definitely have my hands full.
What is the book going to entail?
The rough title, the working title right now, which I'm not married to, is Bold Moves for a Better Life. And essentially each chapter is a different action that you can take or a different way that you can be bold in your life and why that's so beneficial and how it's going to transform your life, even if you just did a couple of the things. It's the compounding effect.
It really is every single day. All right, I've got one more question. On February 20th, 2011 at 5:35 p.m., you sent out your first tweet. Do you remember what it was?
Oh my gosh, hilarious. I have no idea, but I'm sure it was something really obnoxious.
First day on Twitter, and I got to see Benji Schwimmer dance. Big day in D.C., ladies and gents. Big day indeed.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know who that is.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. He's a professional dancer.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
There it is. Well, okay, so if you could go back in time, put yourself back in February 2011, where you were like emotionally in your career and all that kind of stuff. If you could give yourself 1 minute of advice back in 2011, what would you have told yourself?
Oh my gosh. Be patient.
Be patient.
Yeah, be patient. I think that in my early and mid 20s, lack of experience, didn't let me see that all the things which seemed life ending and horrible and caused me depression at the time eventually end. And new, more rich experiences were coming. New people that were more aligned with who I was were coming. And I couldn't have known that at the time. And now I'm so grateful for how things have evolved. So I think that I wouldn't want to spoil too much because it's all panned out exactly as it's supposed to. But I think I would just say, be patient. It gets better.
You can find Kimberly at theboldlifemovement.com. All of the things that we discussed will be in the show notes. Also, you can find her at Facebook and Instagram at The Bold Life Movement, and maybe the best on Twitter at Kimbos_slice. That's a good one. Kimberly,
Old school.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Todd. It was a blast.
Don't forget to hit up the rock stars at printdirtcheap.com and use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. Hey, Life Hunters, thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps. And thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at GoHuntLife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at Go Hunt Life. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and ripcord out.